Hey, I'm Lars, and you have joined me here in my thinking chamber today. You're right now part of Alive. Um, I call this show a bookshelf event from time to time because this is where I like to dive into books that address really important themes for our work in the Educate for Life community. This work is about creating new paradigms in education for lifelong learners. It's not just for early childhood, it's for life. And actually, tomorrow, the day after this particular live event we're doing now, we'll be having an event about AI. That's a topic that everybody seems to be talking about these days. And we tend to focus on how to improve digital literacy of students and educators. That's one of the hot topics right now. And while that is important, at Educate for Life, we believe in our mission of human development in a tech world. So, technology has this potential for sure to change our life, quite literally, as a matter of fact. So, one interesting question is, at least to me, if you get to live to 150, you may have 130 years in the workforce. What role will education play in these long lifespans that are probably continuing to grow? So let me get to the our VIP, our expert of today, um, Ingemar Patrick Linden, and you'll meet him in just a moment. I had the great pleasure a few months ago to meet this gentleman here in my city of Copenhagen, Denmark. And I found that Patrick is in a great position to help us find answers to many of our questions. He's a doctor of philosophy. He's written the book, The Case Against Death. We'll get into that in just a moment. And in this book, he points out that evolutionary biology explains why we age and die, but not that we must age and die, and or that we ought to. And he writes that if our life and future is valuable, then dying is one of the worst things that could possibly befall us. And I couldn't agree more. So let's bring up Ingemar, Patrick Ingemar Linden. Here you are, sir. Welcome to the conversation here.
Thank you. Thank you for your great introduction.
It's great to have you here again, Patrick. Last time we were sitting face to face in here in Copenhagen. Today we are virtual, but virtual connects people really easily, and hopefully for decades or centuries to come, if we get old enough. So the topic of death, it struck me actually when I met you that we don't talk enough about that, and it's a topic that's it changes our life, actually changes society as radical life extension becomes a possibility. So today we're not going into the technicalities of longevity or radical life extension. But we are wrestling with questions that are more related to your specialty, philosophy. And I just want, before we get started really on our conversation, I just want to try if we can frame the term philosophy. And I'm going to need your help, but I found a few keywords which are related to a systematic study of general and fundamental questions concerning topics like existence, reason, knowledge, value, mind, and language. Um, if you're to put the term philosophy or describe that in your way, how would you frame it?
Well, it's when you are not easily satisfied with the answers that are out there, and you keep pushing the why. Why is it so ultimately? And so you arrive at ultimate principles, ultimate answers. And it's in this sense a very critical perspective, you could say, and constantly reevaluating perspective.
So I should have studied philosophy, I can hear. I'm never satisfied. I'm always challenging status quo. All right. So,
Then you are a philosopher for sure.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's the most amazing thing I've heard in a long time. So, thank you for that. I'm really, really excited about the opportunity to change the world for the better, and our community is the same, right? We're all obsessed with changing what's unfair, changing old paradigms, old beliefs that we just need to get rid of, because if they were ever true, they certainly no longer are useful to us. And so let's just start over if we can, and create that desirable future that we want because we can. So we're here to challenge our thinking, our own thinking, and everybody else's thinking, right?
I think Socrates is such a great starting point for anyone who wants to know what philosophy is, because he remarks that we all make judgments about, for example, what is fair. So we must all have a very clear understanding of what fairness is. But when you ask what is fairness as an idea in itself, it becomes difficult. It's not so easy.
No, isn't that quite subjective? There's no objective fairness, I guess.
Well, in the same time, we hope we are right when we make these judgments.
Yeah, true, true, true. All right.
Or it
Yeah,
becomes like the stoners say, isn't that just your opinion, man?
yeah, yes. And well, yes, it
Yeah.
is, isn't it? So, Patrick, my favorite question I like to ask everybody is, why do you do what you do? Why are you a philosopher?
Well, in some sense, I'm just a philosopher by nature. Even when I was a child, there was one instance I was at the hospital and the parents came to visit me, and they asked the nurses how I'm doing, and they said, "Well, he's just philosophizing." It's very calm. And I guess I was like 6 years or 7 years old, and so it's really just is in my nature to philosophize, and also the themes have been the same since I was 7. And so uh, I mean, now it's always been about time, and of course time, entropy, death, life, right? So um like most people, when they are between 5 and 7, they discover the idea of death, and then they kind of get over it. And they don't think that much about it until their parents die and they have a crisis in their midlife, and then they
Yeah,
start thinking about death again, statistically. And then, but in some sense, it always stuck with me, perhaps more than for most people. And then to that, I had this, which I still have. I'm haunted by the passage of time, how quickly things go, and sometimes people they laugh. They said, "Oh, wow, it's already Christmas again," and I'm like, "Help, help!" I need a longer span between summer and Christmas. Right?
yes,
It's just
yes, please.
slow down, so and everything. I mean, you know uh, and when I was 12, I said, slow down now. The years are passing too quickly. We don't need to overdo the celebration next time.
Or can we skip? Can we please skip at Christmas? Yes.
So, so in a sense, it's just basically a character virtue or flaw, depending on how you see it.
Awesome. So I love that framing very much. So if I totally recognize how you describe this, and I have an engineering background. So if I can try to frame what you just said in a more binary way, so I see our kids be think they are immortals, right? They cannot die. They will never die. They don't need to sleep. Doesn't matter what they eat or drink, and they can jump out of buildings. They think they can fly. And me, on the other hand, I sometimes need that button that says stop the world, I want off, or just pause for a moment, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a binary black and white there version of what you said. Yeah. So
No, no, exactly. Imagine a pause button, right? While you catch up on on the many too many things you have to do. Okay.
yes, catch up on deadline stuff. Yeah. So, that's fascinating, isn't it? And you know, I don't know if this is what you describe is what I hear everybody observes. Is it seems as we get older, time seems to accelerate. It's a perception. It cannot be a logical truth, I guess, but it's a perception anyway. Um, if
Absolutely.
if we are to become 200 years old, or our kids will maybe, or their kids, or their kids, do you think that perception will keep accelerating? So Christmas is just 10 minutes away always, maximum.
Um, yeah, probably. I mean, maybe there is a point where it doesn't add that much more to it, but I think so. I mean, that's because, I mean, one theory of the psychological mechanism here is that as we get older, we get more used to certain situations, and we already have kind of a pre-made box for them. So when we're young, everything is new. And so it feels like in a year, high school that we went to, right? That was just 3 years, but we always think about it still. I mean, in some sense, maybe we're shaped by those 3 years. And it felt like a whole life almost when you went to high school, I feel. It feels like a long time. Now, 3 years, it's like you buy a book, you intend to read it, and then you look at, oh, 10 years. 10 years ago, I bought this book. I still haven't read it, right? It's just like, it's so fast. Uh, just because, like, now we have like expectations and categories and so on. So we don't feel all this newness and therefore now it feels like things are going so fast. So a way of strengthening this hypothesis is to say, well, when you go traveling somewhere interesting for let's say a week or 2 weeks, when you come back you feel you've been away for a while. You come into the apartment and it feels new again or different. But when you speak to someone, they haven't noticed that you've been away, right?
Yeah,
They're like
because
surprised
it's only
because
been 2 days.
they're doing familiar things that
Yeah,
their mind is familiar with. So routine is the way to shorten your life in some sense. As they say, the days blend into each other. So the way to have a longer life is to have variety so that the days don't blend into each other too much. Uh, you know, Subjectively, of course, speaking, but what is time?
what is time? Yeah, yeah. Very fascinating. We often talk about our youngest years as those formative years, which are very important, and they are maybe this is the reason actually that everything is new to us, and that makes it formative. That we're learning everything is new to us. Everything it needs to be learned. Um, yeah, that's very fascinating. I never thought of it that way. I just wanna say that we have our community, Educate for Life members, watching out there on social media. So hi to everybody, and people can actually put questions in the live chat if you want to comment during the conversation. So I'm going in a moment to ask the first question that I have prepared that I'm very interested in discussing, but Patrick and I will probably explore a lot of rabbit holes that we hadn't planned, and that's fine. So just for the record, um, and so my no, maybe let's just touch on your book before we get to my question. So, your book, The Case Against Death, and then we created together a subtitle for today called the Philosophical Case for Indefinite Life Extension, which may or may not become a possibility for some or for all. We know that life is expanding, extending. The coming generations will live longer than we will, statistically. Technology, better medicine, medical procedures help us avoid terminal illnesses, at least to some extent today, and that's only getting better and better. So we will be getting older and older, and I think that's a fabulous thing. Um, uh, Patrick, you have mentioned a study. Thousands of people have been asked how long they would want to live, ideally, if they could choose. I want to start there because this is a fascinating question to me. It touches on beliefs, it on our own beliefs, and on assumptions that we have made, and we have maybe never considered alternatives to how life can also be. And this question opens up that in such a profound way. So I just want to share this question. So people were asked in this study how long they would want to live, ideally. And they were allowed to imagine all these breakthroughs in anti-aging medicine and procedures and what have we, longevity measures that are available to you if you want it. How long do you want to live, right? Do you want to live to 80 years, to 120 years, 150 years, or forever? And what was the outcome of that question? What did people say?
So, Lars, this is a very good starting point, I think, because the reason I wrote the book was that I was triggered. I was triggered by the fact that not everyone, in fact, almost no one seemed to agree with me that it would be great to stay youthful and alive for as long as possible. For me, for a long time, I thought, well, that must be what people think. But then, at the dinner party in particular, there was a young lady who said, well, I think it would be boring not to age. And I hope I die before 80 because it would be boring, to keep on going. And I was horrified. I was so horrified. I said, what is this idea? Where does this idea come from? And so I wrote a book explaining the background, the philosophy, the tradition of wanting death, of saying that death may seem terrible in one way or another, but here is a reason for why it isn't so bad or why we need to accept it, right? And I don't agree, so I wrote a book called The Case Against Death. And it's very interesting because I have friends, the friends who agree with me say, what's your next book? That cats are cute. I mean, it's obvious that death is bad,
Yes,
But then, you
and
know,
cats are cute.
yeah. And then but then other people will say, your stupid book, right? they, they thought it's obvious that, if there's life, there's death, and you can't just say no to one of them, right? Some you the more philosophically minded people would say something along those lines. So yeah, then at the time when I started writing the book and researching, they actually had just made a study in 2013. The Pew Research Center had made a study, which to date I think it's the most solid methodologically. It has a relatively large sample, I think 2,000 people. They're representative. It's a representative sample, and so on. And they asked them, how long do you want to live ideally? And only 8% wanted to live at beyond 100. Only
Wow.
8% want to live beyond 100. And this is where you think, well, the question is ideally.
Yeah, ideally.
Ideally, it's not under terrible circumstances, or right. It's
Yeah.
you're relatively
Yeah.
healthy, and
Yes.
you'd rather be not be at all than to be after 100. And why 100? Right? It seems for a
Yeah.
philosopher, we know that is, but
Yeah.
does it have to be? Ought it to be? I mean, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be a certain way. It's not ideal just because it is a certain way. So this is so interesting because if you ask people how many people ideally should be murdered every year,
Yeah. Zero.
they would say zero. And then
Yeah.
you say, but that's not possible. I mean, that's
Yeah.
human nature and the way we'll go.
Yeah.
So on.
Yeah.
It's not achievable. But so they can think, they know what ideally means
Yeah.
in other contexts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But not when it comes to how long we live. It's a real dogma that is so ingrained that we can't see it. It's a prejudice that is just it's just second nature for us to think human life as being 200.
Yeah.
That's the normal kind of upper limit.
Yeah.
Some people live to 121. It's said, but 100. So, okay. Now, a lot of people say, well, okay, people have a problem with the term ideally, right? So they asked actually in the same survey, perhaps a more pertinent question, which is imagine then all of the longevity science working, panning out. You are youthful, and what all that implies, good health, and so on. Would you want to live to 120 and beyond? At least 120. And here, with perfect health and all that, 38% wanted to live that long.
Wow.
38%. So
Wow.
that's a big jump. I mean, first of all, it's a bit absurd because if you think it's ideal to live less than 100, then why would you then change and say you want to live
Now I want to
100?
live a bit longer, but only until 120.
Yeah. It must be your
Yeah.
misunderstand, or it just
Yeah.
reveals that box that people are stuck in when thinking about the issue. But it also reveals that it's a new world. We've never had these possibilities being realistic of expanding with technology's help, expanding the lifespan. So we're not used to thinking about this issue at all. Um, Now, um, 38%, that's a lot of people, but it's still incredible that two-thirds would rather get sick and die within the normal time limit,
Yeah.
right? Than to take this technology and stay healthy and alive beyond 120. I mean, it should be for us, a no-brainer. And also, if you think about the cliche that people do anything to survive and so on, so apparently not, right? Because if
Yeah.
people really care that much about survival, they would say, obviously, I'm going to take the pill. I'm a human. I want to survive,
Yeah.
but there's something going on here. There's a dissonance in how we think about this, and I think it is, and this is why I wrote the book. It's time for us to reevaluate these values and these beliefs right now. In particular because we are not doing a lot on this front. And then say people, we're doing more than ever. It's true, but we're not doing a lot. So if you compare what we spend in terms of money, then the value of the serious longevity and long bio sector is worth a tenth of tobacco industry. 1/10. So we spend 10 times as much on death or things that cause ill health and death than we do trying to understand and fix the mechanisms of aging, which is of course the big cause of death these days.
Yeah, yeah. This is this was so I totally get it. When you discovered this, I simply have to study this and write this book, and this is it's a very profound and very specific example of where we have a certain belief that and it's really hard to understand why we have this belief. Where is this coming from? Because if we look at things from the outside, looking in into the head of any human being, um, it doesn't have to be this way, but there's something in our belief system that makes us say this, say, "Hey, I only want to live to this particular age," because I hear many retired couple, etc., that are saying, "Hey, we really want to see our grandkids grow up, and we really want." And these are very strong motivational forces for many of us, I believe. There are many good reasons for staying alive, provided that it's a good life and all that. So it's really interesting why we have this belief system. So I know the answer to how do we change this is a long answer, and that's, I guess, what we need to unfold during the conversation, and also by reading your book here, The Case Against Death. So I highly recommend that, and we'll also be diving into some extra literature that we'll share after the session here in the show notes for those that want to explore this further, and I hope it's everybody. But let me open up to a bigger question, which is about so our motto or slogan in the community is about human development in a tech world. Human development is the important part to us. And philosophy is now also a top of mind for me, for sure. And thank you for saying that I'm a philosopher. That's a badge of honor, and it makes me very excited to go deeper into this. My question that I want to unfold together with you now is: what role will philosophy play in the future, in your view? Or we could say, which role should philosophy play in the future?
Well, we have a lot of technological progress, but technology itself can't answer what it's all for.
Correct.
That's a philosophical question. So it would be shame if we became extremely good at inventing tools, but not having any understanding of what it's all for ultimately, not just this to fix this problem, that to fix this problem. Because otherwise it's very easy that we just become complete tools of the technology itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like so many examples of this, right?
Yeah.
As all the too much screen time discussion in Denmark in Berlingske Tidende. I've actually
Yeah.
followed that.
Yeah.
I read Danish, especially.
Yes. Yes.
Um, that there it takes a little while, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, or this discussion of really how many laptops in school, you know,
How bad is this
in
really? Yeah.
the answer, right? It is something that is more human, right? And so it's it's
Yeah,
it's hard to avoid if you want to have agency against the technology that you created to avoid philosophy.
yeah, yeah. That's a great take on that. I what I see is every time new tools, new technologies are being put in everybody's hands, which has happened again and again and again through civilization, and it's continuing obviously. Then we struggle as humans to figure out how to deal with it, how to use it properly, how to respond to it, right? That takes a while to find a meaningful, sustainable way to work with this particular tool. And yes, for sure, tablets and mobile phones, that's a heated debate here in Denmark right now, in schools, in kindergartens, where I believe that parents would say, hey, we want human time between the staff, the teachers, the kindergarten teachers, and our children, and don't just put a device in their hands.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's a number of reasons why things happen the way they happen in the institutions. But for sure, the human connection, that meaningful interaction, is something I think most of us really desire in, in now and in the future. Tools are great. We need tools, but not without the human connection to others. And I can only speak for myself, but I could just share a little bit about we are we're facilitating a lot of transformation processes and projects with different kind of organizations, both education institutions, but also commercial businesses and government agencies and others that needs to be adaptable to the change that's happening. Um, and it always comes up that it's our immune system response to new technologies that makes us say stop. But it's also something we always see is that now you can have an AI coach instead of a human coach if you want. The technology can now do that, right? It's ready. But the organizations we work with, they want the human coach. They it's great to have a tool where they in the middle of the night can have a document sent to them because the coach is asleep, but they want the human coach still, even they have these fabulous tools available. So that human connection, I would argue, is important in our future. Would you agree? What's the philosopher's take on that?
Well, I mean, we are by nature social creatures, as Aristotle points out, and uh, uh, the social skills are intangible, and it's nothing that you can read up on quickly. It's something that evolves in a human to human context, and there are also studies saying that young people do have problems with certain social interactions and so on to a larger extent than our generation had, because we were, I think, quite lucky to have existed somewhat prior to the smartphone and all those things that take up all that time. And so um, yes, that there are certain things that cannot be taught a person to screen, and they are perhaps some of the most important things. Um, I'd like to say something else in favor of philosophy, not just being an instrument or like what can it do and what so on, but it's also kind of an answer to what it's all for. And that is when it doesn't rain on us and we have food in our belly and we fixed all those practical issues, what do, right? We can watch a movie, yeah, it's good, right? But we can also engage in philosophy, and it's one of those essentially human things that we can do. So I mean, beavers can build homes and dams and various things, and they can get enough to eat certain days, and that's all fine. But like as the old Greeks pointed out, like this kind of speculative, not just if we get a longer boat, what can we do with it, but the more speculative reasoning. Why are we here? What is the universe? Is there an end or beginning to it? What is time? And so on. That's also a very kind of rich way of being, which I think is a kind of end goal for this technology, that we provide people with the leisure and comfort and so on to be able to express their humanity in philosophical conversation with each other. That is as a value in itself. I mean, why
Yeah.
not? Just like art can be a value in itself, or aesthetic experience can be a value in itself. And it's one of those, today you don't hear that so much. I mean, it's like philosophy has to prove itself. What can it do for something else? But it's also part of the answer for what is all this for that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I'm really curious to discuss today is to how do we bring philosophy um, as this profound mechanism in life, not as an instrument, but as something deep, deeply fundamental part of our life, into the education system also, or I should say, how do we embed this way of thinking and this way of living together in this educational path that we all go through. We're trying to change how that works, but and philosophy needs to be a part and a component in that, in my view. And I would argue that this is not really happening today in the education system. So I would like to start to take us a little bit in that direction. What do you see in that regard as a philosopher, and also how do we make philosophy a more integral part of life as a student, as an educator? Any take on that?
There has to be the time assigned to it, basically. I mean, it has to be part of the standard curriculum to a higher degree, like it used to be in France, for example. They had much more of it. Uh, and then while you do it, um, I think a very good thing is to start with questions or events or something they can relate to, and then let the philosophical discussion, in some sense, arrive by necessity as they're discussing things. But you kind of lead it towards a discussion of ultimate principle, right? So they see, oh, wait, all these things that we talk about here are here's the background to it, right? And that should be thrilling,
Yeah.
really thrilling,
Yeah.
if it's done that way. So in my class, Deaf Longevity and Values, the first class, I gave them a set of questions about how long they wanted to live, if they were religious, what their religious perspective said about death, uh, if if how long they want to live depended on how long other people live or not, and
Yeah.
what they think would happen to society if people live too. And then I had various ages and so on. And very, very quickly, you get discussions about the meaning of life, for example, because one of the answers that people give is say, I want just to see my grandkids grow up a bit, and then I want to fall off and die. And then there were people who had a more open-ended view of life. I want to keep learning or something like that.
Yeah.
Activities that don't have an end.
Yeah.
So you have, it's fascinating, and there's a philosopher in Canada called Christine Oval has been writing about this, that that people can fall in different categories, and there are those who have more of a list of things they need to do, and it's kind of finite. And when they've done, they're kind of done. It's I call it the kind of supermarket list model of life. That you pick these things and then you check out. and that's good. It's like so
That
life
is,
can be completed. But then if you're a different kind of person, you're more explorative kind of person, then there are no fixed limits. You don't do things to have done them. You do them to set yourself up for the next thing you do.
yeah,
And you can't, for you, life is like an open highway, and you want it to be that way,
yeah,
and you don't want it to end. So wow, then the question is, wow, who in this class is more has more affinity to this perspective, and who has more affinity to that perspective, and wow, all of a sudden we were very very deep into it, right? And then, well, we're not the first people thinking about these issues. There's Socrates, for example, and then you take the Phaedo dialogue, for example. That's the one where he is to execute himself by drinking poison, and he's gathered all his friends, and there he explains why he's such a good mood. you know, and, you know, his friends are crying, and
yeah.
he's in a great mood. Like, but Socrates, you're about to die. Why are you in such a good mood? And then you get his reasons. You get his reasons for the soul, whether the soul can survive the death of the body. You get all kind of different theories that then engage with ideas that implicitly or explicitly, or because they're part of a religious tradition and so on, the students are semi-aware of, but they haven't looked at them straight on, and like focused and spent time on. And so, yeah, um, I found that looking at the history of philosophy and ideas, and also culture through the lens of the perspective of death and of the tradition apologism, of finding ways to accept death
Yeah.
versus the other perspective of trying to resist the
Yeah.
death, has
Resist.
been incredibly fruitful.
Absolutely. I think, I don't know if I'm right, but typically we, our community is all lifelong learners. I think we typically put that label on ourselves and each other. You're a lifelong learner. You're one of those adventurers whose bucket list seems to always grow faster than you can tick anything off it, right? There's so much to be explored, so many fascinating topics. I'm certainly one of those, and everybody in our community meets that description, and so do you clearly. Um, so, and I think this is an important characteristic of a human being. I mean, in terms of quality of life, it may not be for everybody. I don't know, but it if you're curious and you get energized by discovering, by learning, you would probably find it easy or easier to fit into society, to play a role that's meaningful to you, to contribute, to do what's meaningful. That would make your life great, and you would be a great companion for somebody else or for a community. As opposed to if you I just want to get to 80 and then I'm done. It's boring if I get too old. Kind of person. Uh, so let's say I wanted to design a future where we help every human being to get excited about learning for life, about keep discovering what is the best way. And we have them in classrooms all over the world, whether they want to be there or not. We need to teach them something. How could we awaken their curiosity and interest through the lens of philosophy? I know we need to dedicate some time. Yes. So maybe the answer to this is, how do we awaken the interest of the politicians that are creating the curriculum? I want to get into a positive spiral here where we bring more and more fellow humans into the world of adventure, curiosity, and discoveries. That makes us then be the ones that want to live as long as we possibly can. What's the best thing? What's the best advice to bring as many people as possible in that direction?
And yeah, so I I don't think it's going to be easy to
I
persuade.
know. That's why I need you, Patrick.
So, when it comes to, I mean, it is. I mean, the Swedes and maybe the Danes to some extent are. I mean, Swedes are engineers and practical people, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Their prime concern in the past was to shield themselves from the cold winters
yeah,
and not to philosophize, you know.
yeah,
And to say, well, no, what we need is not more engineers so we can compete with China. We need more philosophy. No, it's I mean, it's going to be hard, I think,
yeah, yeah,
to persuade them to see the less obvious and
yeah,
like right in front of you advantages of this,
yes,
just to be honest. When it comes to influencing for longevity, we have actually just an organization now, new organization in Sweden called the Swedish, and perhaps it will be called the Nordic, but for the time being, it's a Swedish longevity cluster. And that's where I will be speaking the 7th next month, where we are trying to give uh, uh, recognition and prestige to the project of longevity, which is uh, the project of anti-aging, really, since aging is what kills most
yeah,
of us, but also what is responsible for most of folksjukdomar, most of the common diseases that so takes away from the quality of life and ultimately kills so many people and leaves so many people alone and grieving. I mean, so it's for someone who has just a little bit of knowledge of what's going on in the anti-aging field. It is it's incredibly frustrating to see that these ideas haven't yet permeated the political class at all,
yeah,
at
yeah,
all. It's incredible, right? So when it comes to Sweden and Denmark, we have these welfare states. There are very easy practical economical arguments to be made. Of course, if you have a lot of old people, it's much better that they are healthy,
yeah.
working, functional, happy people than they are old and decrepit and non-working people.
That's a
So
financial case, isn't it?
there's a straightforward technocratic
Yeah,
reason for investing in anti-aging, but also already investing in popular education when it comes to longevity, promoting habits that are already there, right?
yeah,
An awareness that healthy longevity, is in public interest. And the study, right, by David Sinclair and his two economists friends from last year, right, that showed that in America they would save $38 trillion if they could slow aging with 1 year, just 1 year,
wow,
because aging is such a driving cause
yeah,
for all major diseases. That's why people, when they are 20, it's very unlikely they get cancer, but it gets more and more likely after you're 50.
right,
It's age. Everything is aging, right? When it comes to these major diseases. So, well, so my answer is appeal to what they're familiar with. They're familiar with thinking in terms
yeah,
of these technocratic arguments, I guess. And when it comes to philosophy, I don't quite know what to do on that level.
yeah,
What are your? I mean, the thing is, that's why we're creating alternatives. We're creating from the bottom up. Ordinary people create, like your group, and we create different worlds.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's just not there's not just the nation state and what it comes top down through the Ministry of Education. It's a different world now with much more layered and many more communities, and some of them can be very much into philosophy and gain traction and awareness and so on. How would you answer this question?
Yeah, well, I wish I had a good strategy for that, right? So that I think I'm really keen to build that out somehow through experimentation, because I don't think there's one clear recipe. But if I'm to pick on a few components in that I think would contribute in the right direction. One component in transformation is actually the first step is awareness, and we call it awakening. Even awakening meaning uh, we are intentionally trying to serve you examples of how others are already living a very different life. Hopefully something that's desirable. It might also be something that frightens you from going in a direction, but it could also be something that would make you go, wow, I had no idea. For example, that by following a certain way of living, here you see people who are actually 110 and they live an incredible and meaningful life. And if you saw that, because we probably haven't seen it, right? But if we saw that, we might change our opinion about not living beyond the 80, whatever our opinion might be. So by seeing real life examples, literally real life examples here, that could maybe help us to overcome some of these personal barriers or beliefs. So that's one component. We use this in all sorts of different topics and themes, and to help you realize that, hey, the world around you is changing very fast, and here's what's now possible. Did you know that? And typically we really don't know, right? There's so much we're not able to keep up with, like we talked about in the beginning. We need that stop the world. I need a break to catch up with everything I don't know or haven't seen. So showing us something that's really exciting and thought provoking, so something that makes us think deeply and become the philosopher. Or we need to, sense our inner philosopher, I guess, and that makes us think again and challenge our own assumptions, right? And it's that inner journey that I think is really, really interesting. If we can unlock that inner journey for everybody, starting with the kids, but we all need it. The older we get, the more we probably need this, and that's an important component, I believe. But I don't think it's everything. It takes more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate so much about luck, the way things are. I mean, it depends on what people you happen to grow up with or your parents, and then like if you've been lucky enough to be exposed to a certain way of being and living, and that is kind of intellectually curious and
Yeah, yeah,
is looking at that as a kind of a positive rather than as a problem and so absolutely it's about creating a awareness, as you said, and a kind of cultural shift perhaps, or using what's already there
yeah.
to promote this ideas that people already used to try to use them to push them in a more kind of open direction. um, and I think I didn't mention it here, but I think art can be very important here.
Yeah, I would agree totally to that. I did an interview of an art museum in Argentina, actually last year, and they had this incredible way of describing how you learn to see or look at the world differently through the lens of art. very, very fascinating, right? That can really unlock our typical patterns of interpreting the world around us. So do you could you think of any particular art pieces or artists that worked for you in that regard?
When I said art, I was thinking more about storytelling and fiction.
Yep.
And,
Okay. Yep. Yep.
um,
Absolutely.
I mean, I loved the Impressionists when I was young, but I also and I loved the neoclassicists when I was young, and the Romanticists, and I guess that it's very kind of uh, pro adventure, and pro thinking in myths, and
Yeah.
that kind of art uh, from the 19th century mostly.
Yeah.
Uh, so I you know what I that feeling I never really dropped that feeling. Also, the age of exploration in the 19th century, that and that kind of also the optimism and so on. So I guess that kind of art. And
Yeah.
I have furniture from that time too.
Yeah.
so it's more of a kind of a feel than a
Yeah.
particular artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, no one has asked me that question before, so I had to think. Because
Good.
when I think art, I was thinking more stories
Yeah.
in various form of movies and so on. Because as I point out in my book, when a film or a book talks about longevity, it's always in very negative and fearsome and fearful ways.
Yeah.
It's always presented as something an evil person is looking for, immortality, right? And
Yeah.
then the good people know that everything has limits.
Yeah.
And so they need to stop the evil person from transgression, right?
Yeah.
And so it's exactly like the Greek myths about flying too close to the sun.
Yeah.
We're only supposed to
Your
go
wings
through.
will melt and you will fall.
It's incredible. It's incredible that this taboo is still so active,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That hey, keep yourself in your place, human, right? But given the kind of weakness of the religious impulse these days, it's strange that it has survived. So in some sense, I'm mostly arguing against and shocked by secular materialist leaning people
Yeah.
who still accept these nature's limits, given limits. Because I mean, if you don't think nature is created by God, why do you have an obligation to follow nature's limits? Right?
Yeah.
It's just an arbitrary outcome of selection mechanisms. You know, 100, we live to 100, yeah, but we could live as long as a Greenland shark, to 400, or like a
Yeah.
tortoise, right?
Yeah.
Giant tortoise to
Yeah.
200. I mean, there's nothing that is normative with nature if you don't have a kind of religious understanding of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So these stories, I mean, so some of these stories, people never thought about it when I bring them up, and that is that the Lord of the Rings, for example,
Yeah.
the quest for longevity there is
Yeah.
always associated with a problem.
Yeah.
So there are of course those races that are meant to live long, like
Elves
elf,
that
meant to
live
live for.
800.
But if you're trying, like the exactly like the kings of Numenor, when they're trying to get immortality and they don't already have it, then it's bad and it leads to terrible consequences. And you see, having the ring, one of the powers of the ring is that you live long.
Yeah.
But Bilbo says that when he lives long, it's like his life gets too long. It's like you have not enough butter on a piece of loaf. It's like you only
Yeah.
have so much goodness in a life, and if you live longer, it
You
doesn't
spread it
better.
thin
It's
over
just
the years.
it attenuates all the values. Just and so he recognizes that he needs to forego this power. And his counterpoint is, of course, Gollum, the
Yeah.
creep,
Yeah. Yeah.
who sticks to his longevity giving ring, right? And it's just, well, when you read it the first time, the thing is, it's right in front of you.
Yeah.
This ideology of death acceptance, and it's in your favorite stories, and you haven't thought about it.
You
But
haven't
wow,
thought about it. Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
so part of why people still have this taboo
Yeah.
is that these are the stories we tell each other, things like Lord of the Ring, and of course Narnia too
Yeah.
has this.
Mm,
The White Witch,
true.
Yardus, also got
Yeah.
this ill-gotten, life,
Yeah.
and she became a psychopathic mass murderer. Uh, so these stories are very important because they are everywhere in books and movies and so on, and they do infiltrate us and show us the bad, searching for immortality, the good, knowing their limits, and it's something the Greeks would just sit there and recognize it.
They wouldn't be nodding and cheering and applauding for our ability to spot this. Um,
Yeah,
well, so here maybe we have another action step that anybody can easily take, which is to read Lord of the Rings and Narnia with our kids and have the conversation about life and death and longevity and the technology represented by the ring, maybe in this case. Mm?
yeah,
That's an incredibly engaging way to build up to these conversations that I think you could bring along many. Most have already at least watched the movies, but the books are just way better. But anyway, it's a great practical step to take. But if we're just I cannot help to think when you talk about the narrative, the storytelling, and how most stories are actually pretty scary. If you ask me about longevity treatments, all these things. So I think because we don't know better, here's some nutrients, some food additives, here's a pill, here's something else. If you take this, this will help you live longer, and that is not a comfortable proposition. Do we? Are we? I mean, you and I are both very close to longevity communities and biohacking communities, and there's some incredible work being done there that that people should know about, right? That really can improve life. Maybe not on short term, but certainly on long term. But are we good enough at telling the stories about sharing about the work that's being done here? Could we work on the storytelling on this? Would that be an actionable step to take?
yeah, absolutely, and we are, uh, starting to try to write counter narratives, produce counter
Yeah,
narratives
yeah.
to the big narrative. We have, of course, you're familiar with. So we have there's a new uh, endeavor called vitalism. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, as
Yeah,
slightly.
as an organization. So basically, we are arguing that we should spend at least, every country, we should spend about 1% at least of GDP on trying to cure aging for the obvious benefits.
Yeah,
I mean, even if you're not into longevity, if you're
yeah,
into health,
yeah,
that should be, or if you're into good economy and having money to be able
yeah,
to give to other projects, and you should be for it anyway. So that's it's our focus is to persuade those in power, and also to shift culture in a way that's more pro longevity. Uh, Yes, we need to produce better stories, and use all the charismatic people we have, and the people who people want to be like David Sinclair, and we got people like that out there. That's been a good awareness raiser, I think.
Yeah, fabulous. So that I see that as a very clear path forward, which that should be doable, and build up the narrative that actually explain the value and what's happening, what's in progress, which will be for everybody's benefit.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, we need to create heroes that search for longevity.
Yeah.
People that people can relate to, and they can see the point of their quest, instead of always these villains who need to take some terrible measures to live long. I mean, it just struck me that I wrote about Harry Potter, that even in Harry Potter, Voldemort, what he wants is immortality, and he has to kill Harry Potter to achieve it. It's so typical. Like once you see it, you say, "Wow, it's so typical." So I mean, the challenge is to write something better yourself, write something that tells a different story yourself, or produce movies and so on. It'll take time, I guess, but once it happens, it will happen, and people might get used to the concept. I mean, it at the same time, of course, I love Tolkien. I love C.S. Lewis, and they were. It's good that that perspective is there to say, well, hold back, wait a minute. What makes us human
Yeah.
is this you know looking like a good thing but turning out to as a bad thing. And so on. It's really great to explore what could go wrong with this, and so on. So we know the dangers and the pitfalls and so on. That's good. But when, like now, it's almost the only perspective that's out there on the philosophical and the kind of artistic, cultural understanding. It's bad for our health.
Which is not good. But I'm a process person, and I facilitate a lot and design a lot of processes. And the way we work with the future is to describe different scenarios, because there's not one scenario. There are different trends and factors that can pull us in different directions. So it could go in this direction, A or B or C or D. There's an infinite number of scenarios for the future, but we'll describe the desirable ones, the undesirable ones, the probable ones, etc. And a book or a movie is just a scenario. That's how the process guy would describe it, right? I'm a book lover as well. I love these stories, but it's also a scenario. And so the opportunity I see now is, working with cartoonists and authors of fiction and the whole film industry, etc. Get them to produce more scenarios, more stories around these positive narratives. The power of longevity, the wonders. Well, now it's not something you just imagine that you can become 150 years, right? But keep building these stories. Just like I'm sure you know these books where you decide what happens next in the story, right? And the story will change direction based on what you decide. Do you go with the evil queen, or do you go with the lion, or and then the story unfolds from then on. So building these stories could be really interesting to share the realities, or get to the conversations about the realities of life and death, and change how we look at this.
Hmm.
It's
So I mean, it's this alludes to a question you asked earlier. I mean, the resistance is still understandable. I mean, if death is the end, and it would seem like it's too hopeful to think that we'll have an indefinite life
Yeah.
extension. And
Yeah.
even if we have, it's indefinite, but it's not immortality. So death is still certain, say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Unless
Let's
the
not
physical
pretend
world is very
otherwise.
different from
Yeah.
what we think it is, or so on. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if something is certain, but it's also very bad, and it's going to
Yeah.
happen to you, then some people will have a hard time dealing with that. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of the arguments are intellectualizations to avoid making life a tragedy in this respect. And so people have a strong motivation to still want to hold on to the old narrative,
Yeah.
uh, that I think is going to be immovable in some in some. But even if it is, of course, that doesn't mean that they would be against taking longevity technology to extend their lives. But they would still kind of come up with a reason for why, enough is enough, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I want to say here is that it's not necessary to perhaps, get rid of pro-death thinking altogether, but get rid of it as a hindrance from progress in this area.
Yeah.
And then as people, as you say, see people living to 110 and doing well at 120, it will normalize it.
Yeah.
And more and more people would say, look, yeah, I'm going to drop this old ideology of pro-death.
I'll vote for 120 instead of 80 in your survey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, it's like Aubrey de Grey points out that a lot of this has to do with showing it possible, to show that this is a possibility.
Yeah.
So people don't need to protect themselves, protect their self,
Yeah.
psychologically speaking.
Yeah. I there's this particular case here that we're talking about, and looking at life and death, and quite literally. But there's also the whole notion of changing our belief system. If we can change our thinking and our beliefs about our own lifespan and the limits of that, if we can change our way of thinking of that, we might be able to change how we think about so many other things that we thought also we couldn't change. And
Mm.
that's another agenda that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, this here is just one project of emancipation. It's one aspect of that liberal project,
Yeah.
as I see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, death and aging are unfreedoms,
Yeah.
and this here is about expanding your freedom, your
Your
autonomy.
Yeah, your autonomy. And and this is, I don't mean to, and I don't want to take us in that direction actually today, but I see a lot of patterns in our world where we really need to rely on people's autonomy and empowering them to make better informed decisions for themselves, and collaborate autonomously and all that. And the better, the more open-minded we are, the better informed we are and all that, the better we're able to do that. And that's partly an educational challenge, and it's a psychological one as well, that it's a mindset thing, that we need to eliminate all those barriers that we are carrying around, and we shouldn't, there's no need to, right? So I just want to just throw it in there, but I don't mean to take us into that conversation today.
Mm.
Instead, I want to bring us back to ethics, ethics and moral dilemmas. And so, you and I seem to share a lot of opinions here, see things very similar ways. That's maybe not ideal for the conversation, but I want to say, and I operate at a global scale with, and it's fantastic. I work with many different cultures, people who have all sorts of different backgrounds, right? Also religious backgrounds, and it's all good. Whatever is right for you is great for you, right? So what I when I'm introducing these topics, the case against death and radical life extension, or when we are in the educational systems in schools, and then this topic will meet educators who who probably also need to face this challenging thought and open their own minds to this, so they can have the conversation with their students. Now it's not a one-to-one conversation to help you see the benefits of life extension under certain circumstances, but now it's about helping educators to do the same with their students at scale. Let's say that's what we want to do. If not today or tomorrow, then at some point soon, we want the conversations to happen, right? Whatever people decide or think, it's up to them, but we want the conversations to happen with the information that enables the conversation, right? There's all the factors that we've discussed already. There are longevity, procedures, there are technologies, and even just living a happier life can extend your life. So we want these conversations to happen, but people come with very strong beliefs from home, from all sorts of different directions. This can be a very heated debate. I anticipate in some classrooms or in some groups of people. How do we best um, how do we best pave the way or set the scene for these conversations, so anybody, regardless of their background or standpoint, as they begin the conversation, can engage in these conversations?
Well, so you can imagine that it could be, as you said, heated, since these ideas are challenging, perhaps with particular religious perspectives. And but as my experience from teaching this class many times, like so 6 years, maybe 30 times, I taught this class. In practice, it hasn't been a problem. It has been heated, perhaps, but respectful. And you know, philosophy is a bit impolite by its nature because it doesn't spare any particular idea. But that doesn't mean that you should
Yeah.
be impolite on a personal level. And the classrooms I taught in were in Brooklyn, and I had people from all over the world, right?
Yeah.
All of them. And
Yeah.
so, um, of course, when we discuss these issues, it's not to attack any particular
No.
religion or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
But
To have discussion.
we are we are, and the thing is though that most students haven't thought about the philosophical content that strongly of their different belief systems. So there's also a way for them to kind of rediscover their own belief systems, which was very positive. I felt so. How I do this, or how we do this in a practical way, the way I do it is, like I said before, I think it's very nice to start with recognizing where every student is at the first day. So ask them questions. I think I had 10 or 12 questions around this area, and issues, questions on these topics, like how long they want to live, what their religion says of it, or and how important it is that other people live as long as they, and so on, right? And they get to respond to these on an individual level. So they have to spend, an hour or so, enough time, right, to get to some developed answers to these. And then they discuss them with the person next to them that they don't know. And so in this classroom, it could be a Jewish student and a Muslim student sitting
Yeah.
next to each other. Very often that would be the case, right?
Yeah.
Really, it was like the world in a classroom for
Yeah.
sure. Then next step could be like, well, okay, next, because there would be a lot of things they didn't know about what they thought, so they had to do some research on that, and then they had to say, well, so the Jewish students, for example, would say, there would be perhaps two Jewish students there, and like one would say, well, we believe in reincarnation, and the other said, no, we don't.
Yeah.
No, we hardly believe in an afterlife, and so there would be a discussion. So you would see the students, of course, would come in some sense to the meta conclusion that way. Look, we need to philosophize ourselves out of this, right, to some extent. That in some sense, well, okay, we have these religious backgrounds, but that doesn't exclude a philosophical investigation. And so then I went to Socrates' Phaedo, because there you have a discussion about the soul, you have a discussion about the afterlife, you had a discussion of the value of life, so on, right? And so, yeah, you might think that this would be to be very like unpleasant and threatening and so on, but it wasn't. And people felt at the end of the class, I had the similar survey, to see what would happen, and some of them changed their view, others they didn't change their view, but now they understood their view
Yeah.
better. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the virtue of philosophy.
What that is absolutely wonderful. So what I hear you say is teachers out there, educators, and others who are facilitating conversations, when they read your book, they bring it into the classroom. Don't worry, it will be fine. There will be yes, there will mostly be or probably entirely be respectful conversations, heated debates maybe, but respectful debates, and everybody will walk away enriched and now with better understanding of other viewpoints, which is probably good for world peace as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful call to action right there. That we can safely engage in these conversations. That's fantastic, Patrick. I by the way recognize that entirely from my interactions everywhere. It's it people are absolutely open to and curious to understand each other when you're from another place, another culture. People are curious to who you are and your story and so this is a great also a great connection point, I guess, to philosophy and to also the case against death and these conversations. um Excellent. I just want to read a comment here. uh, Nonnas in Italy can be the new persona for long lives. Everyone loves Italian nuns. They are very autonomous and live long. So they can be ambassadors. So that's probably a recommendation to you, Patrick, and to me, to all of us on this mission.
Can I say one thing here? I mean, the study, the Pew Research Center study, it interestingly looked at people's religious views and their views on longevity, and there isn't a kind of fixed standard view here. You can be very much for longevity project and also be very religious.
Yeah,
There's no religion that has like a very strong view on this. There's certain religions that are slightly more, favorable to it, like the Mormons.
yeah,
They have a kind of transhuman element in them, you could say, or at least they're open to that
yeah,
kind of thinking. But otherwise, it's surprisingly open. That is, those people who are for the radical life extension scenario, they are, there's no like negative correlation. that they are religious.
Right. Our nanas are grandmas. Thank you for for sharing that. Yeah, I misread it as nuns. Sorry, my bad. But that's also not a bad idea, by the way. Maybe. Um. So. Um, Patrick, we are coming to the end of the time we have set aside for this great conversation. Time is flying faster and faster and faster as we're getting older, and we're now 1.5 hour older than we were when we started, but still en route to a very high age, I'm sure. I wish that for both of us. Um, the last question I have, actually, I wanna just raise is, and it's still anchored in the education world, and I just wanna see if we can give one last gift to the educators in our community. The educators, the schools, they are dealing with an existing curriculum, right? And certain topics need to be taught to a certain level, certain topics, etc. What are the best intersection points where we can, let's say, if I may, inject some philosophy into the existing curriculum in the time that's already there, topics that are already taught? What are the best intersection points you can think of where we could introduce philosophy more?
Well, if you look at it through the lens of philosophy of death and longevity, it has intersections in so many ways. It's just an incredible gateway to uh, not just philosophy and history of philosophy and ideas, but psychology, for example. So when you discuss whether we are made to live beyond 100, there's a lot of people who are skeptical. They say, no, life would kind of lose its charm because of who we are psychologically. Well, then you have to say, well, who are we psychologically? And then you have to look at the various psychological theories. Fascinating. And it would be a direct pathway
Yeah.
from this philosophical question to the psychological question. So it's not a one-way street. It's like the uh, uh, some questions can lead to philosophical questions. Some philosophical questions will lead you on fact-searching missions, like, for example, about human psychology. And of course, that I do in my book. I look at the theories of motivation we have, and I don't see any reason for why we would necessarily be bored in the long run. Right? So, and then when we talk about longevity in a social context, we have to look at what this could do to society, how we we adapt society to longer living, and can look at social issues such as prejudice against older people. That's very severe, and it's like part of the problem is created by social attitudes around this uh, very rigid view that in different ages you need to do certain things and you're not allowed to do other things. I think it's about to explode, but it has not exploded yet. It's
No,
still very much there. I mean, it's a very illiberal way of looking at the world. So you get into politics also, as you can hear.
yeah.
Then you can look. So people talk about like this longevity would lead to overpopulation. You get into issues of environment and energy and so on. So as you can see, this can just take you in many different directions and be a great prompt for discovery.
That's a great way to wrap our conversation today. We have certainly been exploring a number of different rabbit holes although I think we have stayed pretty loyal to the theme of today. I think we can take pride in that. Patrick, well done to both of us, and certainly to you. I'm really pleased to have had this chance to spend some time together with you today to discuss this very fascinating and thought provoking case against death and why it is we really don't get it yet. And also, we've been exploring what can we do about it to open our minds and make us more curious about, well, if we can add 20 years or whatever to our lifespan, why wouldn't we? Right? There's so much great we can do with those years. So go and get Patrick's book, The Case Against Death, and come prepared, audience, to our next conversation with Patrick. Patrick, I look forward to catch up again soon with you, and I thank you very much for this conversation today.
Thank you. I love talking to you.
Good luck to all of us, and may we live a long life. And speak to you soon.